All right, let's go upstairs, though, right now to Connell. He's upstairs at the Fox Business Desk, and he'll tell us a little bit about a rivalry between two music giants. Connell?
Yeah, perfect, Alexis. After the Grammys last night, right? Grammy Gold flowing out in L.A. last night, the 51st Annual Grammy Awards. No major label dominated, although vaunted Sony Music was actually shut out, didn't win any awards. Now, Sony, a longtime rival Warner Music, are battling some falling stock prices these days and faltering sales in the digital era that we're now in. And we take a look this morning at how the two are faring in this week's edition of America's Greatest Business Rivals. Copping the gold of a Grammy Award can translate into thousands of CD sales and music downloads, which translate into big bucks. And topping those charts is Warner Music with its celebrated labels such as Reprise and Atlantic. And then there's Sony, boasting Columbia Records. Now, Warner Music began back in 1958 when one of the Warner Brothers actors under contract scored a hit for Paramount Pictures. Since then, the company compiled new stars and new labels, eventually becoming a key component in the formation of Time Warner in 1990. In 2004, Time Warner spun Warner Music off at a $2.6 billion deal to a group of investors led by Edgar Bronfman Jr. It's the completion of that deal that allowed Warner Music, now under the ticker symbol of WMG, to become the only standalone publicly traded music company in the United States. Now, Sony Music is controlled by the Sony Corporation of America. Its origins go all the way back to the Columbia Phonograph Company in 1888. CBS bought the company but later sold it in 1938 as CBS Records. In 1968, CBS Sony was formed in a joint venture, but CBS bailed out of the music business in a series of cost-cutting moves, and Sony Music Entertainment label was born in 1991. It became Sony BMG in a 2004 deal between the Sony Corporation of America and Bertelsmann. But Bertelsmann sold its 50% stake in the company to Sony just last year, and that put the whole company back under the Sony Music Entertainment label, one of the four biggest labels in the country, along with Warner Music. All right, so there you have it. Let's get more on the rivalry now as we head back down to the studio and Alexis.
All right, Connell, thank you very much for a closer look at the rivalry between Warner Music Group and Sony Music. I'm joined by Robert Levine. He's the executive editor of Billboard magazine, and Drew Lipsher is a partner at the investment firm Graycroft LLP. Good morning, gentlemen. Good to see you guys. Good morning. All right, Robert, let me start with you. We gave a little bit of the outline of the rivalry between these two companies, but much has changed since some of that video that we've seen. Where does the rivalry now stand?
Well, I think, there are four major labels. Universal is the biggest, EMI is the smallest. Both Warner and Sony are right there in the middle. They're both having some of the same problems as with technology and the internet and so forth. And they're both, because of that, they're both right up against each other. They have some of the same strengths in terms of a great catalog, some of the same weaknesses in terms of it's very hard to sell that catalog for money.
Yeah, I mean, let's be perfectly honest about this, Drew. The industry, unlike a lot of other companies that are just feeling the pain of a recession, this industry has been feeling pain for years and years and years now, particularly because of the onslaught of digital music and the internet. Where does that stand? Because that still is probably one of their biggest issues.
Absolutely. It's been their biggest issue for the last 15 years, really since the library replacement of this from LP and cassette to CD boomed the industry in the late 80s and early 90s. The internet and digital technology has really changed the way people consume media. It's made it much more available, easier to access, and a lot of the key differentiations and the factors by which each of those labels sold artists on joining those label groups no longer exist anymore. It's very easy for us to start a band right here and put our music up online. Whether or not anyone hears it is a different issue, or whether or not anyone should hear it is a different issue.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Googles, the MySpaces of the world, it's changed the business. I know, I think it was Warner, right, that bought Lala, is that right?
They have an investment in Lala.com.
Yeah, I mean, so what does that mean, though, for the concept of buying a star? I mean, is it now about the song and less about the star, less about the record?
I think people want to consume music by the song, but they want to identify and have an experience with a star. And that's much more valuable. When you talk about people buying concert tickets, people buying T-shirts, they do that by the star, and those companies need to invest in those other businesses, and Warner's done that a bit.
So, Drew, when you look at the different things that they can do, one of the things, for example, that Universal successfully did is they did a deal with Activision and the likes of the whole Vivendi deal. Are those the types of mediums now that they need to think about in terms of how to get their music out? If it's on Guitar Hero, Rock Band, maybe that changes the way people purchase music.
Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. I think that the notion of owning a master and exploiting a relationship between an artist and a label in the traditional fashion is over, and really a lot of these labels need to think about the agency business. What expertise can they build in-house? What expertise can they have that really help get the music in the hands of people? As Robert said, for better or for worse, it's become a singles-driven business again, and the notion of, when we were kids buying an album, waiting for the Tom Petty album or the REM album or the Rolling Stones album to come out and listening to it from start to finish, that doesn't exist anymore. Yet, music remains a key cultural experience. What songs kids listen to are a cultural badge for them. It's just the songs are much more fungible, and they're moving on and off these songs much more quickly than we ever did.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was watching the Grammys last night with my husband. I said, do we have that most recent Coldplay album or Adele or, and we don't think about albums anymore. We think about songs. Yeah. And yet it's such a shame because I'm sure if we actually listened to the entire Coldplay album, as evidenced by, some of the performances last night, we'd probably enjoy it. But
it's very good.
It's the record label's responsibility to get them out there, right?
They want to make you listen. Yeah. No, I'm kidding. I think some artists still make great albums, and I think one of the things you see with, it's a singles business, but it's becoming a singles business, but people do respond to albums. Like Coldplay really sells albums. Mm-hmm. An artist like a Katy Perry or a Lil Wayne might sell more singles. But artists like Coldplay, Robert Plant, Alison Krauss, they still sell many more albums than singles. They still sell, in the case of Robert Plant, Alison Krauss, I think they still sell more CDs than digital music.
Yeah, but isn't that because of the audience that's listening to their music?
Yes.
In part, that's absolutely true. It's generational.
It's a generational difference. I mean, I would still get an album, but I'm not sure that the 25-year-old would still get an album.
Back many years ago, there was a whole group of people and time that was spent doing what was called sequencing a record. And the song that was first on the record and the song that was last and everything in between, that was a long and arduous process because the artist really meant the record to be listened to in a very particular way. And you think back to A and B sides of LPs, that was a well-orchestrated process. And today, that's really sort of thrown up in the air. You can listen to it in any order you want.
Last question, Robert. Live Nation, Ticketmaster, a lot of people talking about this deal and how this could change some of the business. What do you make of it?
It's the biggest thing that's happening this year, maybe in a few years. I mean, topic #1 in the music business, certainly at Billboard, is that deal. I mean, the Grammys are nothing compared to this. It's going to change everything because for the first time, you could have one company that's not only bigger than one of the major labels, but potentially bigger than, I think, most of them, depending on the valuation of the deal. They're going to control talent. They're going to control ticketing. They're going to control venues. That gives them just about everything. A
lot of power. All right, gentlemen, we're going to leave it here. Robert and Drew, thank you guys so much. I hope you'll come back and join us.
Thank you
very much.
All right, guys, coming up, an indictment is expected.